Spirit has a large variety of add-ons that drastically affect how her power works, so I know that it can be hard to navigate which ones you should and should not be using. There are add-ons that are absolutely crucial for making Spirit as strong as she is, add-ons that are almost completely useless, as well as add-ons that quite literally make her power worse than default. And I'm here to guide you through each and every one of them so you can be fully prepared before playing her. I hope you enjoy the video. Alright, so before we start, I just want to mention that these green add-ons here are now blue in the game and the yellow ones are now green. Unfortunately, the tier maker hasn't been updated, but yeah, they're still the same add-ons, so just imagine that these two categories are the correct colors. But okay, anyway, so getting right into it, starting at the very top of the strongest add-on category, we have Rusty Flute. Rusty Flute is by far Spirit's best add-on due to how valuable and almost crucial recharge speed is on Spirit. In order to understand this a little better though, let's talk a little bit about Spirit's power in general. Overall, Spirit has one of the most punishing powers of any killer in the entire game. If you misuse her power, meaning you use it without getting a hit or down for it, you then have to walk down the survivor as a 110 killer with no power for anywhere up to 15 seconds. And before you try to make the argument, well Rem, that's what her passive phasing is for. No, her passive phasing is not something that you can consistently rely on at all to get hits. Not only is it something that you can't see and have zero control over, but Spirit's breathing is so loud that the survivor should almost always be able to pinpoint where you are, whether you're passive phasing or not. Spirit's passive phasing is also unlike Onryo's in the sense that it doesn't make her go entirely invisible for multiple seconds, so there are always visual cues to tell where she is. With that being said, the survivor should almost never get hit by you during this period of downtime between phases unless they have no resources, or you're at such a shitty palette that you'd probably be able to get the hit even without passive phasing. This means your only option during this downtime typically is to waste time waiting for your power to come back and walk down the survivor to the best of your ability. I also want to highlight though that even if you use her power correctly and successfully hit every single phase, the downtime between being able to use your power by default is way too long. The survivor should almost always make cross-map distance off of their initial hit if you use most of or even half of your phase bar to get that hit. With that being said, return back to what I said about Rusty Flute being a necessary or crucial add-on. Rusty Flute provides a 40% increase to recharge speed, allowing you to heavily close the gap between getting the hit and being able to use your power again, meaning you can down the survivor without them making cross-map distance. It also makes Spirit's power much more forgiving for missed phases or learning Spirit players who are bound to continuously misuse her power. Obviously, because they're learning. Even for experienced Spirit players though, the audio in this game is far from perfect, and perks like Iron Will, Light-Footed, Lucky Break, etc. exist, so sometimes you'll lose the survivor in phase and will be forced to come out early. If you come out relatively quickly, Rusty Flute then allows you to quickly readjust your positioning and phase again without losing too much distance on the survivor. Overall, without recharge speed, Spirit's power is 10 times more punishing than it already is, and makes Spirit a significantly weaker killer than she is without recharge speed. It is quite literally the difference of her being an S tier killer and a low A tier killer. I know her positioning on tier lists is debatable, but regardless, you get my point. Now, moving on to Mother-Daughtering. So following Rusty Flute, Spirit's next best add-on is Mother-Daughtering, or MDR for short. MDR has undergone many nerfs up until this point. On release, it offered a 66% increase to Spirit's movement speed and phase, then it was nerfed to 40%, and now it sits at 25%. While Mother-Daughtering is obviously much weaker than what it used to be, it's still an incredibly strong add-on that makes Spirit 10 times stronger than she is by default. Spirit already has, in my opinion, the second strongest chase power in the entire game next to Nurse. And having this kind of speed basically takes away any kind of counterplay that the survivor might have, simply because they cannot react to what they're hearing at all. For those who don't know, there's a couple second delay from the time Spirit begins phasing to the time that the survivor can actually pinpoint where the directional audio is. So if Spirit is anywhere near you and is using Mother-Daughtering, she will already be on top of your head by the time you can hear where she is. Along with the insane chase potential it offers for movement speed, Mother-Daughtering is also incredibly strong due to the pseudo recharge speed that it provides. Because you're moving so fast, you won't need to use as much of your power to get the injury or down as you typically would, meaning your power has less to recharge, so you get your power back faster. This is something to keep in mind for all of Spirit's movement speed add-ons. Speed basically also equals recharge speed, but it is significantly the case for Mother-Daughtering because of how significant the speed increase is. It's also significant to note the benefits that MDR provides in terms of map pressure. Spirit typically has horrible map pressure since she cannot use her phase to traverse the map and then instantly use it for chase, meaning the most she can do is A, use a bit of her power for traversing so she has it readily available, or B, walk around the map as a one-tank killer to then instantly use her power where she needs to. This obviously doesn't offer very good map pressure in comparison to killers like Blight, Billy, Ghoul, etc., which is why Spirit typically thrives in area defense, playing around one side of a map and holding tight 3 or 4 gens. Using MDR, however, gives her much more flexibility for these things that she would not have using any other add-on. Lastly, I also just want to quickly highlight the benefits that this add-on potentially offers to learning Spirit players. MDR makes it so you don't have scratch marks in phase. This is the trade-off or quote-unquote downside that was given to the add-on for having really high movement speed. This obviously makes it difficult to use this add-on if you aren't already experienced with tracking audio. However, I feel like this can actually be really good for quickly disciplining a newer Spirit player who is still learning tracking by having to rely strictly on audio alone, as opposed to having all of the other visual elements of the game, such as scratch marks. Okay, so the next add-on I want to put in this category is Rin's Broken Watch. I'm placing Rin's Broken Watch in this category basically for the same reasons as Rusty Flute. Broken Watch is 30% recharge speed as opposed to Rusty Flute's 40%. And while it's a sizable difference, it's still a very strong add-on basically for all of the same reasons. So just to recap, this recharge speed allows you to A, heavily close the gap between getting the hit and being able to use your power again, meaning you can down the survivor without them making cross-map distance most of the time. B, makes her power much more forgiving for missed phases or learning Spirit players, as well as C, you're able to come out of phase a lot of the time, quickly readjust your positioning, and phase again without losing too much distance on the survivor. And finally, the last add-on I'm going to be putting in this category is Muddy Sports Cap. Obviously, Muddy Sports Day Cap doesn't have nearly the same extent of benefits that MDR offers, since the movement speed comparison is 25% to 10%. However, it is still by far her best add-on aside from the 3 previously mentioned. Like I stated before, with MDR, any kind of movement speed increase is insanely good for Spirit due to A, added lethality in chase, B, pseudo recharge, so basically 2 add-ons in one, and C, slightly better map pressure. Okay, moving on to the great category, I've decided to start it off with White Hair Ribbon, which grants you 20% added charge or activation speed. There have been a lot of comparisons done before between Muddy Sports Cap and White Ribbon, but I'm here to confirm that Muddy Sports Cap is definitely the better of the two. We already discussed the incredible benefits that come with movement speed, for example, harder for survivors to react, as well as pseudo recharge, but in terms of long phases specifically, you also cover a longer distance at a faster speed using Muddy Sports Cap compared to White Ribbon. It takes approximately 6.75 seconds to activate and use your entire phase with White Ribbon, while it takes 6.5 seconds to activate and use your entire phase with Muddy Sports Cap, while also reaching a further distance. Even in regards to what White Ribbon is used for, short phases. White Ribbon saves you 0.3 seconds out of the base 2 seconds for activation speed, which can help to catch survivors off guard to get them less distance when you're short phasing. But even with the time saved, you should almost always be guaranteed this hit on the survivor anyway with Muddy Sports Cap, so long as you're practicing proper husk placement and phase pathing. Overall, I think White Ribbon is more of a feel-good add-on than anything else. I'm not trying to dunk on White Ribbon at all, I think it's still a phenomenal add-on and much better than a lot of spirits, but in my opinion, it is slightly overrated and is certainly not better than Muddy Sports Cap. Okay, and next we have Origami Crane. This is by far Spirit's best brown add-on in my opinion. Despite being a brown rarity, it still provides you with a 20% increase to recharge speed, which is so good compared to her other brown add-ons, which we'll get to. So if you're ever running low on flutes or watches, while of course those two are the far better option, Crane can still be a very beneficial add-on to run in placement of these if need be. And last but not least, the final add-on I'm putting in this category is Gifted Bamboo Comb. So similar to Crane, Gifted Bamboo Comb also serves as a great replacement for white hair ribbon. The comparison between the two add-ons is 20% to 15%, so there is actually only a 5% difference. That being said, if you really enjoy using the ribbon add-on but are running low on them, Comb can be used in its place for nearly the exact same effect. Again, however, Recharge is a much more valuable and stronger add-on to have, so that's why Origami Crane still sits above this one, despite it being very good for a brown add-on as well. Okay, so following Comb, we now enter the good category of the tier list, and the first add-on I want to put here is Zori. I really wish this could be placed higher on the tier list since again, additional phase movement speed is so good for Spirit. However, Zori only provides 5% increased movement speed in phase. Now, I understand why it's so low, since the brown add-on obviously has to be weaker than the green, and Muddy Sports Cap is 10%, but I just feel like 5% here doesn't compare to the strength of the other add-ons previously mentioned, including the two other brown rarities. If they want Comb to be a weaker version of Muddy Sports Cap, I feel like they could stand to slightly increase the percentage on Cap so that they can slightly increase the percentage on Zori to make it more worth it. Maybe 12% and 7%. Otherwise, I think it will just remain an okay add-on. Decent, but not really ever worth running in comparison to the other movement speed add-ons or even the other brown add-ons previously mentioned. The next add-on to go in this category, and I'm so sorry if I butcher the pronunciation on this, is Kaiun Talisman, which provides 1 extra second of duration to Spirit's phase. It sucks because I feel like this is such a good concept for a Spirit add-on, but the idea itself is much better than when it's actually put into practice. When compared to Muddy Sports Cap, which like I said earlier takes approximately 6.5 seconds to activate and use the entire phase duration, Talisman takes 8 seconds to traverse almost the exact same distance. White Hair Ribbon even is a much better add-on because, as I stated earlier, it's 6.75 seconds with a slightly shorter distance. On top of that, however, and the biggest reason why duration add-ons are this low on the tier list, is because it also makes your recharge so much slower. The longer duration of phase means extra time that your power bar needs to refill, especially if you do a long phase. So it is almost never worth running these add-ons when you have the other green rarities right in front of you. However, I do still want to place it in the good category because it's still much better than some add-ons to come. Plus, Talisman can actually help players who are learning Spirit by giving that extra time in each phase to really focus on what you're hearing. At this point, like I said, I definitely still think you're better off using recharge add-ons so that you can use your phase more consistently and more often and not be punished as much for missing phases, but it's still not a horrible add-on. And again, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, but Shiawase Amulet then of course falls right behind Talisman, as it's basically the exact same add-on but slightly worse, only adding 0.5 seconds to your phase duration. There's quite literally no reason to really run this add-on as stated in the reasons for Talisman, but also because half of a second is hardly noticeable. However, it's still a more useful add-on than many of the others we'll soon get to, so I'm still going to include it here in the good category, albeit right at the end. Okay, moving on to the next category, I wanted to dedicate a specific space for add-ons that can be decent when specifically paired with other add-ons or perks, but are basically useless when equipped on their own. The first one we'll discuss is Uchiwa, which grants you your power back instantly after being stunned with a pallet. I actually really love this add-on and think it's one of Spirit's most fun and unique add-ons to use, as you can create some really fun builds around it using perks like Enduring, Hubris, To Complay, Knockout, etc. However, it at the very least has to be equipped with Enduring, a perk that makes your stun duration shorter. If you use Uchiwa with the default stun duration, it takes way too much time to finish the stun, navigate around the palette, and catch up to the survivor, so they've now been able to make a lot of distance off of the stun. It's also just a really niche add-on due to the lack of value you should get from it in the mid to late game, or against survivors who are communicating with each other. As soon as the survivor stuns you and realizes you have Enduring and Uchiwa, or as soon as their teammate tells them that you have it, survivors will go out of their way to pre-drop palettes for the rest of the match and deprive you of its value. Typically, it's a good thing if survivors choose to pre-drop against you, since Spirit can easily shut down drop palettes by blocking one side with her husk. This is, of course, assuming it's not a god palette, but you obviously need to have your power in order to do this. So if your only means of recharge speed is Uchiwa and they're only pre-dropping, you're basically playing with no recharge add-on at all. Of course, if you're going against slightly clueless or uncoordinated survivors, you'll get a lot more value than the latter, but against decent survivors, expect to only get good value from this for the first couple of chases in the match. Similar to Uchiwa, Kintsugi Teacup grants you your power back instantly after breaking a palette. It kind of gives the same energy as Dracula's blue add-on Pocket Watch, where he gets his bat ability back after breaking a palette, or Ghostface's blue add-on Olsen Wallet, which grants him his power back after breaking a palette. It's very curious though that in these cases, however, the add-ons are blue, whereas Spirit's is iridescent, despite hers being significantly weaker in my opinion than Dracula's or Ghostface's. Also similar to Uchiwa, Teacup also cannot function properly on its own. You at the very least must equip some kind of perk that will break palettes faster, such as Brutal Strength. Otherwise, it will often take too long for you to kick the palette and catch up to the survivor before they make another resource. Aside from that, however, this add-on has always been such an interesting concept to me, since it quite literally contradicts what Spirit thrives in during chase. Spirit's ideal scenario typically is to force the survivor to drop a palette, so she can then set up her husk to block the palette and zone them with her face to guarantee the hit. It is almost never worth breaking a palette for Spirit unless A, you're waiting for most of your power to recharge. Even here though, there are a lot of cases where it's better to just keep the survivor zoned at the drop palette and just wait for your power to come back, especially if there are other strong resources nearby. You're typically better off just waiting for your power and keeping the survivor at the already dropped palette. So there's that scenario, and then B, it's a Spirit God palette, meaning a palette that Spirit physically cannot get around, or where it consumes too much of her power to do so. Or C, you're not currently in chase and are getting rid of stronger resources in an area that you're defending. So having an add-on, let alone an iridescent add-on that requires her to break a palette to get her power back, seems just so out of touch from how her power is used. Overall though, I think Uchiwa and Kintsugi Teacup are just secondary recharge add-ons. They can be fun when combined with perks such as Enduring for Uchiwa and Brutal or Fire Up for Teacup. However, they will never ever be as strong or consistent as add-ons like Rusty Flute, Broken Watch, or even Origami Crane. Alright, now moving on to my favorite category, the useless category. And the first add-on I'll be discussing here is Katana Tsuba. Before I get into it, I just want to say that it is a little unfortunate that out of 20 add-ons in total for Spirit, 8 of them are either basically completely useless or quite literally make her power worse than her default. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time going into depth about the concepts of these 8 add-ons and explain in detail why they don't work with Spirit's power and what is so fundamentally wrong with them. Part of the reason why I really wanted to make this video was because I think Spirit is way overdue for an add-on rework, and with that, I truly hope that my thoughts on these add-ons are heard by the DVD devs. Okay, so starting with Katana Tsuba specifically though, this add-on has 2 effects. It extends the invisibility duration while reappearing from a phase walk by 0.2 seconds, as well as increases your movement speed while reappearing from phase by 5%. This is the first of 3 add-ons I'm going to be talking about that essentially requires you to play M1 Spirit to get any kind of value from it. The idea here, as far as I can assume, is to only use short phases on survivors and rely on the added movement speed and invisibility coming out of phase to catch them off guard and get the hit. I tested this add-on using a full lunge out of phase build with perks like Coup and All Shaking Thunder to get maximum value from it. And while there were some funny moments, in terms of actual strength, this add-on is incredibly weak and almost completely useless. I'll talk about this more with others to come, but I really dislike add-ons that take away the integrity of the killer. Spirit's whole skill ceiling and what makes her fun is learning how to A. use her husk, phase pathing, and other elements of her kit, and B. be accurate in pinpointing audio to guarantee the hit in every chase. If you're just short phasing on every survivor, you're not only not actually learning how to use her power at all, especially if you're a newer spirit player, but you're also not using her power in the way that makes her as strong as she is. And that's what this add-on is basically forcing you to do if you want to get value. If I just play normally and I'm phasing on top of survivors' heads, then the add-on quite literally does nothing. It can actually hinder you in some ways because you use your muscle memory to come out on top of the survivor, and sometimes the added movement speed out of phase can actually push you over the survivor's hitbox. So for experienced spirit players, this add-on can actually punish you for being accurate. Imagine that. Moving on, the next add-on I want to place in this category is Furin. Before we get into it, I want to mention that this add-on is the reason why I had to wait so long to make this video. Furin had been bugged for almost an entire year, making it literally unplayable. The add-on is supposed to create a universal phase noise that can be heard throughout the map by every survivor every time you phase, but the bug made it so you, as the spirit player, could also hear the noise as well, making it literally impossible to hear anything while phasing. With that being said though, they finally fixed the add-on in one of the recent patches, so I was finally able to test it to determine its maximum potential at this point in time. For context, Furin is the add-on behavior I came up with to replace prayer beads, which was the old purple spirit add-on that gave survivors who were outside of your tear radius a universal phase noise every time you phased. The only problem was that spirit didn't have directional audio for her phase at the time, so it was impossible for the survivor to know if you were actually close by to them or not, making the add-on have essentially zero counterplay. You would set up your husk and phase to a survivor outside of your tear radius and be able to consistently catch them off guard. This included consistently grabbing survivors off of generators. Behavior then replaced prayer beads with what we have now, Furin, which is basically the same thing, only survivors now hear the universal phase noise no matter where you are on the map, and most importantly, they keep the directional audio of your phase, meaning they should always be able to tell if you're actually close to them in phase or not, since they won't hear the directional audio if you're not close by. This obviously makes the add-on significantly weaker in comparison to what it was, and in my opinion, borderline useless. Regardless though, I still wanted to see how much value you could get with Furin, so I paired it with other stealth perks that would make me undetectable or the survivors oblivious. My conclusion to this was unfortunately exactly what I figured. If you're going against newer players, or survivors that aren't used to playing against Spirit, you can catch them off guard and even potentially get some grabs off of generators. However, against any survivor who is relatively experienced, or is familiar with Spirit's directional audio and the add-on, they will know to listen for it. And in this case, the add-on becomes completely useless, even with a build surrounding it. So again, it can be a fun add-on to get value from, but it should only ever really happen against inexperienced players, making it extremely weak. I strongly believe that they should have just completely reworked this add-on after Spirit's directional audio change came through, because it's impossible to balance something like this without making it extremely overpowered or useless, as clearly we saw with prayer beads. Okay, moving on, we have Wazikashi Saya. This is the add-on that allows you to return back to your husk while phasing. You can kind of think of it like Dredge's power, but for Spirit. I feel like this is another idea for a Spirit add-on that seems good in concept, but unfortunately just doesn't work well in actual practice. Spirit already has the ability in her base kit to play around 90% of pallets and guarantee the hit. So it's so unnecessary to use an add-on like this for trying to outplay pallets. The only time that this add-on can be useful in chase is if it's a god pallet that you can still get to the other side of. For example, Shack pallet. However, it's certainly not worth running an entire add-on just for one pallet that may or may not be on the map you end up on. So yeah, chase aside though, the only other thing that this add-on can be useful for is patrolling hooks or exit gates or generators that are far away from each other. For example, setting up your husk with one gate in view, phasing to the other to check on it, then instantly teleporting back. Or setting up your husk with a hook or generator in view, phasing away to check another part of the map, then teleporting back to potentially catch someone rotating either back onto the generator or for the unhook. I used a build to highlight this add-on's maximum potential using Dragon Script. This was to basically bait survivors back onto a regressing gen, get them exposed, and then teleport back and down them immediately. So yeah, you can do some fun stuff like this with it, but in terms of strength, it's very not good. In order to even do the fun things with it, you also typically have to run a duration add-on, such as Purple Amulet, so that you can actually have the time that you need in phase, which is a problem in and of itself, but we will get to that add-on. Moving on, remember how I said that there were 3 add-ons I was going to discuss that essentially require you to play M1 Spirit to get any kind of value from it? Well, this is the second one. Juniper Bonsai reduces the cooldown of your passive phasing by -1 second and increases the duration of your passive phasing by +50%. So the add-on quite literally incentivizes you to play M1 Spirit, not use your phase and try to get hits with passive phasing instead. I mean, all I can really do is repeat what I said for Tsuba, in that I really hate that Spirit has add-ons that don't benefit her power at all, don't encourage you to learn her power, or in this case, don't want you to use her power literally at all. It's so confusing to me and is honestly just such a waste of an add-on slot. I ended up testing this add-on by bringing a haste chase build, so we wouldn't be as powerless as a normal 110 killer, and then playing solely M1 Spirit. So no phasing, no using power in chase, and only relying on the passive phasing to try to get hits. I also brought mother-daughtering just for traversing the map to get us from chase to chase faster. It was definitely one of the goofiest builds I've ever attempted with Spirit, and I genuinely hope that no one recognized me in these games. In conclusion though, yeah, I mean, of course we were able to get some goofy hits on some short fillers because of the added strength of the passive phasing, but for the most part, it was really difficult to get value. If we didn't have any help from our haste perks, trying to walk down survivors as a 110 killer with no power is not the most enjoyable experience. Spirit also has super loud breathing, so even if you have stronger passive phasing, a lot of the time survivors can still pinpoint you just by listening and chase. If you are going to attempt this, I'm not sure why you ever would, but if you do, you should at the very least use the Tomie cosmetic, as her breathing is much quieter than Spirit's breathing. Regardless though, I don't know why you would ever use an add-on like this to play M1 Spirit when you could just play Trapper or anything else. So again, completely useless and totally takes away from the integrity of the killer in my opinion. Okay, the next add-on I'll be placing in this category is Mother's Glasses. A blue rarity add-on that gives killer instinct when a survivor is within 2 meters of your husk. Now, I'll talk about this more when we get to Cherry Blossom, but I really hate that Spirit has multiple add-ons that provide killer instinct, given the fact that she's an audio-based killer and you cannot hear anything over the killer instinct. It forces you to focus more on the visual heartbeat as opposed to the audio, which not only takes away from the integrity of the killer, but it's also just bad. In this add-on's case, say you're phasing on a survivor, they run past your husk and it procs killer instinct. Now, you hear the heartbeat and sure you know they're around your husk now, but the delay of the killer instinct heartbeat sound actually prevents you from being able to hear or pinpoint which direction they're running in or if they're doubling back. I was really debating on putting this add-on in the makes her power worse category because of this, but I still think it's just more useless than anything, so I'll just keep it here. Aside from that though, the add-on fundamentally also just doesn't really make sense. A lot of the time when you're phasing a Spirit, you're in one of 3 scenarios. Either A, you're phasing to a survivor from a distance, therefore they won't be anywhere close to your husk anyway. B, your husk is set up to block a pallet or window, therefore the survivor has no reason to go near the husk since it's blocking the resource, and even if they do vault into it, you're going to already know that they're there due to the vaulting sound. Or C, your husk is set up somewhere that is in the same tile or place that you're chasing, and you're already in the process of tracking the survivor by their audio, so you'll already know if they're moving towards your husk or not. I confirmed this in all of my testing with the add-on. It's just so weird. I hate it. I don't see the point of it at all. Maybe the intention was to like help newer spirit players, like give them some kind of visual guidance when learning. But like I stated earlier, it quite literally hinders you in that regard more than anything. And last but not least for this category, this is the third and final spirit add-on that exists that incentivizes you to play M1 spirit to get any kind of value from it, Senko Hinabi. Hinabi is a blue rarity add-on that causes your husk to explode and block any vault within 4 meters of its location after you come out of phase for 5 seconds. There are a few reasons why this add-on is so confusing to me. First, Spirit can actually block windows by default with her husk and prevent survivors from vaulting it from the side your husk is on, as well as trap them inside of the vault if they medium or slow vault into the husk from the other side. So having an add-on that blocks a window when you come out of phase that your husk already has to be close to anyway makes little to no sense. Second, Spirit can already play around windows incredibly well by default. You never need to use perks that block windows on Spirit, such as Bamboozle, etc. So why would you ever want to use an add-on slot for one? And lastly, the actual mechanic of the add-on is just very poorly designed to how you use Spirit's power. Let's say you set up your husk near the window at a jungle gym tile. You phase halfway around the wall, and you hear the survivor running to the window. If you want to get add-on value, you'd be forced to come out of phase early, so the window blocks here before the survivor can vault it. However, now you're a 110 killer with no power and aren't in position to hit the survivor since you had to come out of phase early. Now they make the pallet on the other side of the tile or another resource, whatever. You could maybe make the argument that the add-on would be decent if it blocked the window as you were phasing, but having it block the window after you come out of phase makes it so weak. Even if you were to try to force value by setting up your husk at a window, charge your phase, then instantly come out so it blocks the window and you can then walk down the survivor while getting your power back sooner, the add-on only lasts 5 seconds, so it's way too short of a duration to do anything like that. The only time I found that you'd ever actually get value from this add-on is if you placed your husk on a different elevation or floor. So right below or right above a vault, and then zone the survivor to the blocked window. For example, I had done this during testing at the window at Gallows in Dead Dog Saloon. However, like I said though, these are all typically windows that Spirit can outplay even without the add-on. So there's basically no reason why you should ever use it over other ones. Alright, moving into the next category. Oh, Amulet, how far you have fallen. For context, Yakuyoke Amulet used to be one of Spirit's strongest add-ons and honestly probably one of the strongest add-ons in the game. Not only did it provide you with a really long duration, but it also had a pseudo recharge speed increase and no downsides or trade-offs. So using it with other add-ons like MDR was crazy strong because you basically had movement speed, recharge, and duration using only 2 add-ons with no repercussions. Since then, however, Amulet has been heavily nerfed to the version we have today, which grants you an extra 3.5 seconds of phase duration. However, it decreases your movement speed in phase by -15%. First off, I explained this a bit before for Talisman, but the big reason why duration add-ons are this low on the tier list is because they make your recharge slower. The longer the duration of your phase means extra time that your power bar needs to refill, especially if you do a long phase. If you thought this was bad with Talisman, Amulet is in a whole different league. There's no longer that pseudo recharge effect that I mentioned. Instead, base recharge using this add-on takes up to 25 seconds. Yes, you heard that correctly. 25 seconds just so you can phase almost at the same speed that you walk. Amulet really feels like that stereotype add-on where it used to be insanely strong and the devs didn't really know how to change it or make it fair, so they just kind of nerfed it into the fucking ground. This has to be one of the worst add-ons that exists in the game, since it quite literally makes Spirit's power worse than her base kit, and it's somehow still a purple rarity add-on. So yeah, not much else that needs to be said. Do not ever use this add-on, unless maybe you're trying to do some funky teleport build with Wazikashi Saya, like I mentioned earlier, but I don't know. Even then, you're not really playing Spirit since your power isn't being used for chase, you're more so playing a jump scare killer and banking on survivors getting caught off guard by it one time during the trial. And last but very least, we have Dried Cherry Blossom, and yes, I'm putting this in its own category. Dried Cherry Blossom is the spirit add-on that gives you killer instinct on survivors who come within 3 meters of you during phase, while also removing scratch marks. There's not really much to say about this add-on other than that if you're wanting to learn Spirit or play her long term, do not use it. It completely takes away from the integrity of the killer by removing the audio aspect of her kit entirely, since you can't hear anything over the killer instinct that is so loud. And that's literally what she's about. She's an audio-based killer. It's also just not a good add-on in general since the killer instinct isn't even accurate. It's like a heartbeat that fades in and out, so it basically just gives you a general area of where the survivor is as opposed to a pinpointed location. So for example, if the survivor is running or doubling back, it's incredibly difficult to tell exactly where they are based on just the killer instinct. The only reason why I'm not putting this add-on in the category above with Amulet is because I do think there is a purpose for this add-on in terms of people who want to play Spirit and have some kind of impaired hearing or hearing loss. I am a strong believer that everyone who can be accommodated for should be given that opportunity, so I do like that there is a way for those people to still play Spirit despite her being an almost fully audio-based killer. Otherwise though, yeah, never use this add-on. It generally hurts my heart so much every time I see a Spirit in pubs using it. If you want to play her long term and get good with her, this add-on teaches you absolutely nothing and will just hinder your learning process by tenfold. I also just wanted to include a separate quick tier list for the best combination of add-ons that you can use. So again, the first one was a tier list for each add-on's strength individually. Now we're doing combinations. So of course, any combination of Rusty Flute with Mother-Daughter Ring, Muddy Sports Cap, White Hair Ribbon, or Broken Watch are fantastic, but no combination will ever beat the strength of Recharge Speed and Movement Speed. So the strongest combinations are of course Rusty Flute and Mother-Daughter Ring, followed by Rusty Flute and Muddy Sports Day Cap, since the latter is just a less extreme version of the first. For Rusty Flute and White Hair Ribbon, as I said earlier, I think White Hair Ribbon is still a really great add-on, it just doesn't top movement speed in my opinion, so I'll put this combination here right below it. Next is Rusty Flute and Broken Watch. If you're still a beginner Spirit player, I would highly recommend using double recharge add-ons. This will allow you to spend as much time as possible using your phase to practice tracking. It will also provide you with the least amount of punishment for missing your phases, which of course is bound to happen when you're still learning. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't ever really recommend using Rusty Flute and Talisman over the other combinations. But again, Talisman can help players who are learning Spirit still by giving that extra time in each phase to really focus on what they're hearing. However, again, at that point, I definitely still think you're better off using double recharge add-ons so that you can use your phase more often instead and be punished less for missing phases. Like I said, the ones that I just went over are definitely the best add-on combinations in my opinion for Spirit. Below those would just be the same add-on combinations but with Broken Watch replacing Rusty Flute. And then below that, Origami Crane replacing Rusty Flute as well. Similarly, you could also replace any of the second add-ons with their weaker counterpart, and you would still have some very decent add-on combinations. Rusty Flute and Muddy Sports Cap, Rusty Flute and Zori, Rusty Flute and Gifted Bamboo Comb, Rusty Flute and Origami Crane, as well as Rusty Flute and Shiawase Amulet. Lastly, you could always use double movement speed add-ons as well. This is probably the only add-on combination I would recommend using that doesn't explicitly have a recharge add-on with it. And that's because, like I spoke about earlier, movement speed add-ons do have a kind of pseudo recharge element to them on top of the movement speed. So it's the only time you can really get away with not bringing recharge and still make your Spirit very strong. So that's Mother-Daughter Ring and Muddy Sports Cap, as well as Muddy Sports Cap and Zori. And that's it. I hope this Spirit add-on guide was helpful for you, and if you like what you saw or want more guides for Spirit, feel free to check out my other guide videos for her, or my 350-page written Spirit guide that will be linked in the description below. Can't wait to see you in the next one, but until then, take care.